you'll come crawling back. You always do. That's what Jake said the night he left. His voice was calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed it. He grabbed his keys, slammed the door, and the echo hung in the air long after he was gone. I remember standing there, barefoot on the cold tile, clutching the coffee mug I hadn't even taken a sip from. The steam had already died, just like every bit of warmth in that house. He'd said a lot of cruel things over the years, but that one stuck. Because deep down, a part of me believed him. For 5 years, Jake made sure I did. He built me up just enough to tear me back down. "You'd be nothing without me, Sarah," he'd whisper whenever I got too confident. "You think anyone else would deal with you?" And the worst part? I used to not. I used to believe that was love, someone keeping you real. But that night, something inside me cracked. Not dramatically. Not like a movie scene with shouting or broken glass. It was quieter, a numb, sinking kind of realization. I was living a life that didn't even feel like mine. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No car in the driveway. No good morning texts. No apologies. Just absence and a note on the counter. "You'll realize soon enough. Don't call me." I laughed when I read it. It wasn't a happy laugh. More like one of those ugly, shaky ones that sound like a sob halfway through. Because I had called him before. Every time he left. Every time he tested me. Every time he wanted to see how fast I'd fold. But this time I didn't. Not for a day. Not for a week. And somewhere between the panic attacks and the long nights staring at my ceiling, I started to remember who I was before him. I found an old notebook, the one I used to write in before I met Jake. The pages smelled like dust and old perfume. Inside were lists of dreams, plans, and goals I'd completely forgotten. Start my own online store. Learn photography. Travel to Seattle. I had been someone once. Someone curious, brave, loud. Jake hated that version of me. He called her too much. So I buried her to keep him happy. That notebook felt like a message from an older, braver version of myself. One who had just been waiting for me to remember her. So that night, I made a decision. Not the dramatic kind. Just quiet and firm. I was going to rebuild my life, piece by piece, without him. But before I could move forward, I had to face what was still holding me back. The apartment we'd shared was full of ghosts. His cologne, his shoes by the door, the dent in the couch where he used to sit. Every corner whispered his name. So I did the only thing I could think of. I sold everything. Furniture, TV, the couch, even the stupid blender he said I never knew how to use. By the end of the day, the apartment looked bare, like a blank canvas. And for the first time in years, I could actually breathe. That night, I lay on the floor with a single blanket, staring up at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. I thought about all the versions of myself that had tried to please him. The quiet one, the apologetic one, the small one. And I whispered something out loud that I hadn't said in years. "You were wrong, Jake." My voice cracked, but it felt powerful. Because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. It's strange how silence can feel louder than words. For weeks, my phone didn't ring. No calls, no texts, nothing. At first, it drove me crazy. Checking it every 5 minutes, convincing myself it was broken. Then something shifted. I stopped waiting. I started waking up early, making coffee for myself, opening the blinds. Tiny things that used to feel pointless when Jake was around suddenly felt like rebellion. I got a part-time job at a small boutique downtown, the kind of cozy place that smelled like candles and vanilla. It wasn't much, but it gave me structure. And for the first time in a long time, I met people who saw me, not Jake's girlfriend. One afternoon, my manager, Chloe, asked me if I'd ever considered running my own thing. "You've got an eye for style," she said, folding a scarf. "Why not open your own online store?" My heart jumped. Because that dream, it had been on the first page of my old notebook. I told her about it, how I'd always wanted to create something that felt like mine. She smiled and said, "Then start small. Just start." So I did. Every night after work, I stayed up researching Etsy shops, learning about branding, and taking photos with my old camera. The photos were terrible at first, blurry, dark, off-center. But I kept trying. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my family. It was my secret project, something pure, untouched by his voice in my head. 2 months passed. I named the shop Second Wind. I liked that name. It felt like a quiet promise to myself. I launched it on a Thursday night. No big announcement, no expectations. Just a girl sitting in her small apartment with trembling hands and a beating heart, clicking publish. I didn't sell anything for the first week. Then came one order. Then 3. Then 10. By the end of the month, I was packing boxes at 2 a.m., humming to myself. And that's when it happened. Jake showed up. It was a Saturday afternoon. The bell above the boutique door chimed, and I looked up, and there he was. Same confident walk. Same smug grin. But something in his eyes flickered when he saw me. I froze for a second. My heart did that thing, the quick, painful squeeze. But I didn't show it. I just smiled politely and said, "Hi, can I help you?" He looked around, pretending to browse, then leaned closer. "So this is what you're doing now," he said, his tone halfway between amusement and disbelief. "Selling scarves." I wanted to shrink. Old habits die hard. But then I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass, the steady posture, the quiet confidence in my eyes, and I remembered who I'd become. So I said, "Yeah. And it's going pretty great, actually." His smile faltered. He wasn't used to that, me not apologizing, not defending myself. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "You look different." "Thanks," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I am." After he left, Chloe looked at me like she'd just witnessed a plot twist. "Was that?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah. That was Jake." She raised an eyebrow. "Well, I hope he enjoyed the view, because you just look like you walked out of your own success story." I laughed, and it hit me how true that was. Because the girl who used to cry herself to sleep after every fight, she wasn't here anymore. That night, I opened my shop dashboard. One of my products had just gone viral, a photo of a handmade tote bag caption, "Made for your comeback." Orders exploded. Comments poured in. People resonated with the message, with the story I'd unknowingly told through my work. And for the first time, I realized something important. I didn't need to destroy Jake to win. I just had to outgrow the version of myself that needed him. But Jake wasn't done. When someone like him feels their control slipping, they don't walk away. They circle back. And soon he did. With a smile, with excuses, with memories. But this time, I wasn't the same woman he left behind. He texted me 2 weeks later. "Hey, I've been thinking about you. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I wanted to reply, but because of how predictable it felt. Jake always came back when things started going right for me. It was like clockwork. Every rise I had was his cue to test my strength. Still, a small, old part of me trembled. The part that remembered our late-night drives, his laugh, the way he'd say "you're mine" like a promise. But then I remembered how "your mine" had turned into "you'll never make it without me." So I left his text on read. A few days later, he showed up at my building. No warning. No respect. Just Jake being Jake. He was standing by my door with a paper bag in hand. "Got your favorite coffee," he said, like that erased everything. "Jake," I said quietly, blocking the doorway. "You shouldn't be here." He smiled, that same confident tilt of his head that used to melt me. "Come on, Sarah. Don't be like that. I just wanted to see how you're doing." "I'm doing fine." He looked me up and down, like he didn't believe it. "Yeah, I can tell. You look good." I felt his words like static, unwanted, familiar. "I have work to do," I said, stepping back. "You should go." But he didn't move. "Can't we just talk?" "I miss you. I made mistakes, okay?" There it was, the script. The fake vulnerability. He always made it sound like he'd broken a vase, not a person. "I'm sorry," he said, sighing dramatically. "You didn't deserve how I treated you. I was under pressure." "Pressure?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "From what? Being decent?" His jaw tightened. He wasn't expecting that. I wasn't supposed to talk back. I was supposed to cry, forgive, invite him in. But I didn't. I simply said, "I've forgiven you, Jake. But that doesn't mean I want you back in my life." And then I closed the door. I leaned against it for a second, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release. That small, scared version of me was still trying to believe I couldn't stand without him. But I had just proved her wrong. He didn't stop, though. He started showing up at the boutique again, pretending it was just coincidence. He'd linger near the counter, ask meaningless questions, compliment my earrings. Little reminders that he was still around. Chloe noticed it too. One afternoon after he left, she said, "You know that's not normal, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, I know." That night, I blocked his number. Deleted every picture. Every memory. But something strange happened. Instead of feeling empty, I felt light. With the noise gone, I could finally focus. My business was taking off. Collaborations, online shoutouts, local influencers posting about my bags. I remember sitting in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of packages ready to ship, the floor covered in tissue paper and tape. The air smelled like cardboard and success. That's when I realized something. Jake had been right about one thing. I did need him once. But not anymore. A week later, I got an invitation to feature my shop in a local artisan fair, a big deal for small businesses like mine. Chloe insisted on helping me set up the booth. We stayed up late the night before, laughing, painting a wooden sign that said, "Second Wind, Handcrafted Confidence." When I saw it the next morning, something in me swelled with pride. It wasn't just a brand name anymore. It was my story. And, of course, he showed up. Because of course he did. I saw him from across the crowd. Same smirk, same leather jacket. But this time I didn't panic. I just smiled, fixed my hair, and kept selling. He walked over eventually, pretending to browse again. "Wow," he said, eyes scanning the line of customers at my booth. "You've really done something here." "Yeah," I said simply. "I have." He chuckled. "Guess I was wrong about you." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Yeah, Jake, you were." He smiled like he wanted to joke it off, but his voice faltered. He could see it. He could feel it. The shift. I wasn't his anymore. Success has a strange way of attracting the very people who once doubted you. Jake started popping up everywhere, at the cafe near my shop, the gym I'd recently joined, even on my social media. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then I realized it wasn't. He was watching me. Not because he cared, but because he couldn't stand seeing me thrive without him. It started subtly. Comments under my posts. "You look amazing. Miss the old days. Don't forget who helped you start all this." That last one made my blood run cold. Because Jake hadn't helped me start anything. He'd only ever stood in the way. I ignored him, thinking silence would send the message. But people like Jake don't take silence as rejection. They take it as a challenge. A few weeks later, I got a call from Chloe. Her voice sounded tense. "Sarah, did you know someone posted about you in a business forum?" I frowned. "Posted what?" She hesitated. "It's not good. They said your store is a scam, that you buy cheap items and pretend they're handmade." My stomach dropped. I spent hours trying to track the post down. It had no name attached, just an anonymous account. But the language, the phrasing, the bitter, smug tone, I knew it. It was Jake. At first, I felt sick, that heavy, shaky kind of fear that sits right behind your ribs. He knew how much this meant to me. He knew exactly where to strike. But this time, I didn't collapse. I gathered screenshots, reported the post, and reached out to my customers directly. One of them replied, "Don't worry, Sarah. I've bought from you. Your work is real, and so are you." That message lit something in me. I wasn't going to let him ruin me again. Not when I'd come this far. The next day, I walked into the boutique with my head high. Chloe looked at me like she was ready for war. "You want me to call him out?" she asked. I smiled. "No. Let me handle it." So I did what Jake never expected. I told the truth, publicly. I went live on Instagram, surrounded by my half-finished bags and messy studio. I said, Someone's trying to discredit me. But I want to be transparent. This is me. This is my work, and I'm proud of it. I showed my hands, rough, ink-stained, covered in fabric dust. I showed the sketches, the designs, the receipts for materials. People flooded the comments with support. The post went viral, not because of the drama, but because of the honesty. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You really had to make it public, huh? Could have just talked to me. Jake." I stared at the message, my pulse pounding. He didn't even deny it. I typed back, "You could have supported me. You didn't." That's all there is to say. Then I blocked him again. That night, I sat on my couch surrounded by orders, bigger than ever. The smell of fresh leather filled the room. I thought about how, for years, Jake had been the loudest voice in my life. But now he was just background noise. Except there was one more thing I didn't expect. A week later, a woman messaged me. Her name was Melissa. "Hi, Sarah. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Jake's new girlfriend. I think we need to talk." My stomach twisted. I didn't know what she wanted, but something told me this conversation was going to change everything. When I saw her name pop up on my phone, I almost didn't answer. The last thing I wanted was another reminder of Jake, or anything connected to him. But there was something about her message that felt desperate. So I called her back. "Hi," I said cautiously. There was silence for a few seconds before a soft voice replied. "Sarah, thank you for picking up. I know this is weird, but I didn't know who else to talk to." Her voice shook. I took a breath. "It's okay. What's this about?" She hesitated. "Then, it's about Jake." Of course it was. Melissa said they'd been dating for about 8 months, which lined up almost exactly with when Jake had left me. "I thought you should know, he talks about you," she said quietly. "A lot." I sat back, my stomach tightening. "Talks about me how?" She sighed. "At first, he said you were obsessed with him, that you couldn't let go. But then I noticed things like how he'd check your store's page or read your comments out loud. I felt a strange chill crawl up my neck. It wasn't love, it was possession." Melissa's voice cracked. "He's been angry since your business took off. He says you made him look stupid, that you owe him for motivating you." That was Jake, rewriting the story so he could stay the hero. Then Melissa said something that made my heart race. "He tried to use my account to post about you." I sat up straight. "What do you mean?" "I caught him," she whispered. "He was typing that same rumor, about your store being fake. I confronted him, and he lost it. Threw a glass. Said you ruined his reputation." I didn't speak. I just listened. "I'm leaving him," she said after a pause. "But I thought you should know what he's been doing. He won't stop until someone calls him out." For a long time, I stayed silent. Not because I didn't have words, but because I had too many. Everything I'd feared about Jake's manipulation, his need for control, it was still alive and thriving. Only now it was hurting someone else. "Thank you," I finally said. "You didn't have to tell me this." "I wanted to," she replied softly. "You were right about him. I just wish I'd seen it sooner." When we hung up, I just sat there, staring at the wall, my hands cold. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was grief. Grief for her. For the girl I used to be. For anyone who had to unlearn loving someone like Jake. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his words again. "You'll never make it without me." But now, those words didn't sting. They sounded pathetic. Because I had made it. And he couldn't stand it. The next morning, I opened my notebook, the same one I'd found months ago. Under dreams, I added a new line. Help other women find their second wind. That's when an idea began to form. A new side project. A small online community for women starting over after toxic relationships. No selling, no marketing. Just support. I called it the Rebuild Project. A week later, I posted about it on my Instagram story. When someone tells you you're nothing without them, prove them wrong by becoming everything you were meant to be. It blew up overnight. Hundreds of messages. Women sharing stories of recovery, growth, freedom. It hit me then. My pain wasn't wasted. It had purpose now. And yet, Deep down, I knew Jake wouldn't stay quiet. Melissa had warned me he'd make things right in his own way. And when people like him say that, it never means peace. I didn't know what was coming, only that it would test everything I'd built. I didn't hear from Jake for a few weeks after Melissa's call. It almost felt too quiet, like that tense calm before a storm. And I was right. It started on a Monday morning. I woke up to a flood of notifications, hundreds of them. My phone buzzed nonstop, the screen lighting up with message after message. At first, I thought my shop had gone viral again. But then I saw the subject lines. Why are you scamming people? Is this true about your store? I used to support you, but this is disappointing. My stomach dropped. Jake had taken it further. Much further. Someone, and I didn't need 3 guesses to know who, had made fake screenshots showing me copying designs from other small creators. They looked real. Professional. Even had fake timestamps and DMs. The post was everywhere. He'd turned the same strategy that once broke me emotionally into something that could destroy me professionally. I froze for a few hours. Didn't eat. Didn't move. Just stared at the laptop screen. The comments were vicious. Wow, another fake girl boss. Can't trust anyone online. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. People believed what they wanted to believe. For a brief moment, I felt myself slipping back into that old mindset, the one where I second-guessed everything, where his voice echoed louder than my own. But then I thought of Melissa, and the women who had messaged me through the rebuild project. If I let him silence me now, I wasn't just letting him win, I was proving every one of his words right. So I decided, this time, I wasn't running or hiding. I was going to fight back, openly. I spent the next 2 days gathering proof. Screenshots of my design process. Invoices. Email trails with suppliers. Time-stamped photos. I even hired a friend, a digital forensics expert, to verify metadata from my original files. The truth wasn't just on my side. It was documented. Then I did something I'd never had the courage to do before. I went to see him. Not to argue. Not to yell. Just to end this. I found him easily. Same old apartment, same old routine. He opened the door, surprised but smug. "Sarah," he said slowly, leaning on the frame. "Didn't think I'd see you again." I met his eyes, steady. "We need to talk." He smirked. "Oh, so now you want to talk?" "No," I said. "Now I want you to stop." His grin faded a little. "Stop what?" "You know what. The fake posts. The screenshots. The messages." He laughed. That low, infuriating laugh that used to make me feel small. "Wow. Still paranoid, huh? You always were dramatic." I pulled my phone from my bag, opened the folder, and showed him everything. The metadata, the timestamps, even a digital fingerprint tying one of the files back to his IP address. For the first time, his face changed. The confidence cracked. "You don't scare me," he muttered. "I'm not trying to," I said calmly. "But if this continues, I'll report it. And I won't stop until you're held accountable." He clenched his jaw. "You think anyone will believe you?" I smiled slightly. "They already do." I turned to leave, but he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "Sarah, I just wanted you to remember me." That stopped me cold. I looked back, and for a moment, he didn't look like the monster I'd built up in my head. He just looked pathetic. "Then you should have been someone worth remembering," I said. And I walked away. That night, I posted again, not to defend myself, but to own the truth. I wrote, "When someone tries to destroy your peace, it's not about you. It's about their fear of seeing you grow beyond them. I'm not ashamed of my past. It built me. But I won't live there anymore." The response was overwhelming. People rallied behind me. Other creators shared their own stories of being sabotaged or harassed. Within days, Jake's fake accounts were banned. The forum posts were deleted. His lies had burned out under the weight of my truth. A week later, I got an email from Melissa again. "He's leaving town," she wrote. "He said he can't stand seeing your face everywhere." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some victories don't need applause. I just closed my laptop and sat by the window, watching the morning light spill over the city. For the first time, I felt safe. Not because he was gone, but because I no longer feared what he could do. A few months later, the rebuild project became more than a side thing. It turned into workshops, online meetings, support groups. We even hosted our first in-person event, a small gathering of women sharing stories, laughter, and second chances. I stood at the front of the room that night, looking at all those faces, brave, tired, hopeful, and realized something beautiful. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was helping others do the same. After everyone left, I sat alone in the quiet hall. The chairs were stacked, the lights dim. And out of nowhere, I thought of that first night, standing barefoot on the cold kitchen floor while Jake walked out, saying I'd never make it without him. I smiled, because now, the only thing I couldn't imagine was life with him. It's strange how peace feels unfamiliar after chaos. For months after Jake disappeared from my life, I'd wake up expecting a text, a rumor, a shadow of him lurking somewhere online. But each day that passed without one was like another stitch closing an old wound. I started sleeping better, eating better, breathing deeper. The rebuild project was thriving, and my store was doing better than ever. But the real transformation wasn't in my business. It was in me. I wasn't flinching at footsteps behind me anymore. I wasn't apologizing for existing too loudly. I wasn't looking over my shoulder for his approval. I was finally living without fear. One afternoon, I was speaking at a women's event downtown, something I never imagined myself doing a year ago. The theme was starting over. I stood on stage in a pale blue dress, hands trembling around the mic, staring at a sea of faces who'd all lived through their own kind of heartbreak. I said, "You don't need closure from the person who broke you. You give it to yourself by choosing peace over pain." The crowd was silent for a moment, and then they clapped. Not because my words were perfect, but because they understood them. After the talk, a man approached me while people were packing up. He looked familiar, kind eyes, quiet smile, not pushy. "Hey," he said, "I just wanted to say that your speech hit hard. I'm Ryan." I thanked him, thinking it was just another kind stranger. But over the next few weeks, I kept seeing him at other community events, charity drives, even a coffee shop I loved. Not coincidentally running into me like Jake used to, just genuinely there. He'd ask how my shop was doing. He'd listen, not interrupt. He'd remember little details, like my favorite latte order, or the way I doodled on napkins when I was thinking. I wasn't looking for love, not even close. But sometimes life sneaks in gently when you finally stop guarding the door. One evening, after we volunteered at a local shelter event, Ryan walked me to my car. We talked about everything and nothing: movies, childhood, the weird comfort of late-night drives. Then he asked, "Can I tell you something without it being weird?" I laughed. "Go ahead." He said, "You have this calm about you, but it's not the kind that comes easy. It's the kind people earn." That one sentence hit deeper than any compliment ever had, because he was right. I had earned it. Every scar, every sleepless night, every small victory. Still, part of me hesitated. Whenever he'd text, my old instincts would whisper, "What if he turns out like Jake?" So I moved slowly. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove myself lovable. I was learning to just be. Ryan never pushed. He didn't need to fix me. He just showed up, consistently, quietly, kindly. And that's how I realized what love is supposed to feel like: safe, steady, and patient. Meanwhile, the rebuild project grew faster than I could keep up with. We were featured in a local magazine, then a national one. Emails started flooding in from women across the country, sharing how they'd left bad relationships, started businesses, gone back to school. Every story reminded me that pain doesn't define us. What we do with it does. One night, after a long day of answering messages, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. The city lights flickered below like scattered stars. Ryan called. He said, "You know, I've been thinking when people break something, they usually throw it away. But you rebuild it better. Even stronger." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. "Yeah," I said softly. "That's kind of the point." A few weeks later, I got invited to speak at a university event about resilience. I almost said no, public speaking still terrified me. But then I remembered that scared girl on the kitchen floor, holding a cold mug while a man told her she was nothing. I owed it to her to keep going. During the Q&A, a student asked, "Do you ever regret what happened with him?" I paused. The room was silent. Then I said, "No." Because if I hadn't gone through that pain, I would have never found the strength. I would have never met me. After the event, I walked outside into the cool night air. Ryan was waiting by his car, holding 2 coffees. "Guess I'm your unofficial driver now," he said, smiling. We sat in silence for a while, watching the city glow. Then I said, "You know what's funny? For years, I thought love was supposed to hurt. I thought if it didn't make me ache, it wasn't real." He looked at me. "And now, I said, "I think real love feels like breathing after holding your breath for too long." He didn't respond. He just reached over, took my hand, and held it like he understood everything I didn't say. That night, when I got home, I opened my old notebook again, the one that started it all. Most of the pages were filled now, goals achieved, dreams realized, lessons learned. But at the very bottom, I wrote one last line. He told me I'd never make it without him. But the truth is, I never really started living until he left. The next morning, I mailed my first donation from the Rebuild Project to a domestic violence charity. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Because healing, I realized, isn't about erasing the past. It's about rewriting it, in your own handwriting with your own ending. And for the first time, I wasn't scared of what came next. I wasn't defined by what broke me. I was defined by what I built from the pieces. I hadn't thought about Jake in months. His name had stopped showing up in my notifications, his ghost had faded from my dreams, and for the first time in years, he wasn't the first or last thought in my day. Life had finally settled into something peaceful. Steady mornings, coffee that didn't taste like anxiety, laughter that wasn't forced. Ryan and I had been together for almost 6 months now, and things felt easy. No games, no second-guessing, no walking on eggshells. Just calm. But sometimes, peace brings the ghosts back, not to haunt you, but to make sure you've really moved on. It happened on a Thursday. I was at the community center, helping set up for a Rebuild Project workshop. We were organizing chairs, unpacking boxes of journals and pens, the usual chaos before a big event. Chloe was there too. She'd become my right hand through all this. She was arranging snacks on a table when she said, "Sarah, don't freak out, but someone's looking at you like they've seen a ghost." I turned around. Jake. He was standing by the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. For a second, everything in me froze. Old instincts flared, heart racing, breath catching, that flicker of fear that comes before you remind yourself you're safe now. I took a deep breath. And then, to my own surprise, I smiled. "Hey," I said, simply walking toward him. "Didn't expect to see you here." He looked thrown off by how calm I was. "Yeah," he muttered, glancing around. "I saw your event online. Thought I'd stop by." His voice was softer, but it carried that same undertone, the one that used to make me shrink. Except now it didn't. We stepped aside, near the hallway. I crossed my arms, waiting. "So you're doing all this now," he said, motioning toward the posters and tables. "Helping people?" "Yeah," I said. "Helping women rebuild after toxic relationships. It's been growing pretty fast." He nodded, eyes flicking away. "Good for you." There was a pause. Then, the question I knew was coming. "Do you ever think about us?" I looked at him, really looked. He had dark circles under his eyes, his hair was shorter, his posture slumped. He looked like a man who was tired of pretending to be invincible. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not in the way you think." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I don't hate you, Jake. I don't even think about what you did as much anymore. It's just part of the story." He stared at me like he didn't understand the language I was speaking. Because he'd always believed power came from control. He didn't understand that peace was stronger. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I messed up," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know. I wanted to see how you were." I nodded slowly. "You don't need my forgiveness to move on, Jake. You just need to stop repeating the same story." He blinked, like he didn't expect compassion. I've been in therapy, he said, almost defensively. Trying to work on my issues. That's good, I said sincerely. I hope you keep going. He stared at me for a moment, and then his expression softened. That fake charm gone, replaced by something almost human. You look happy, he said finally. I am, I replied. Happier than I've ever been. He nodded, and for the first time since I'd met him, he didn't argue. He didn't try to make me doubt it. He just said, I'm glad, in a voice so small it barely made it past the noise of the room. I turned to leave, but before I did, I said something I hadn't planned to. You were wrong, you know. I did make it without you. He didn't say anything. Just gave a slow nod, like he'd known all along that I would, but never wanted to face it. Then he walked away. And that was it. No grand speech. No apology that fixed everything. Just quiet closure, the kind you give yourself. I stood there for a moment, watching him disappear into the parking lot. There wasn't anger in me anymore. Just gratitude. Gratitude that it was over. When I went back inside, Chloe looked at me anxiously. You okay? I smiled. Better than okay. She handed me a stack of journals. Good? Because we've got a room full of women waiting for you. As I walked to the front of the hall, I saw their faces, some smiling, some nervous, some hiding the same pain I once carried. I took a deep breath and started speaking. You might think you'll never feel whole again, I said. That the person who hurt you took something you can't get back. But trust me, they didn't take your strength. They just delayed you finding it. A few women teared up. A few nodded. I smiled softly and added, healing doesn't mean you'll never remember what happened. It just means you'll remember and still be able to smile. Later that evening, when everyone had left, I sat alone in the quiet hall again. I looked down at one of the journals someone had left behind. On the first page, she'd written, I'm not ready to be okay yet, but I'm ready to start trying. I closed it gently and felt a lump rise in my throat, because I remembered when that was me. And now, I was the one people looked to for strength. As I locked up and stepped outside, the air was cool, crisp, and full of that soft hum only late evenings carry. Ryan was waiting by the car, waving. When I reached him, he asked, How'd it go? I smiled. Perfect. He held my hand as we walked to the car, and for a moment, I glanced up at the night sky. No ghosts. No fear. No anger. Just peace. Earned, not given. That was the last time I saw Jake. Not because I ran from him, but because I didn't need to anymore. And if you've ever been through something like that, you know that's when you've truly healed. It's funny how the biggest changes in your life don't happen in loud moments. They sneak in quietly, in the way you wake up one morning and realize your shoulders don't feel heavy anymore, or how you laugh without checking who's watching, or how you make coffee and actually enjoy it instead of just surviving through another day. That's where I was. No more chaos. No more pretending. Just peace. But peace doesn't mean life suddenly turns perfect. It means you finally know how to stand steady, even when things aren't. 3 months after that last encounter with Jake, the rebuild project had grown bigger than I ever imagined. What started as a few women chatting online had turned into a national network. Real stories, real healing. We started hosting monthly meetups in different cities. Women who'd once whispered their pain now stood on stages sharing their stories. They laughed, cried, hugged, and it was beautiful. It felt like watching pieces of myself heal through them. One evening, I was sitting at my desk going through messages when I found one that stopped me cold. It was from Melissa. Hey Sarah. I don't know if you remember me. Well, of course you do. I just wanted to say thank you. You helped me more than you know. I left the city, started my own thing, and I'm happy. Really happy. I smiled, tears filling my eyes. It hit me that healing doesn't end when you stop hurting. It ends when you start giving, when your story becomes a bridge for someone else's. And Melissa's message was proof that maybe all that pain had never been wasted. It had simply been repurposed. Ryan walked in just as I was wiping my tears. He leaned against the doorframe. Good news or bad news tears? I laughed. Good. Just full heart kind of tears. He smiled, walked over, and kissed the top of my head. Then I'll take those. He looked around my messy workspace. Boxes, notes, vision boards, fabric samples from my store, and said, "You've built a whole world here." I thought about that for a second. Because he was right. I'd built something out of what was meant to break me. And it wasn't just a business or a movement. It was a life. A few days later, I got invited to speak at a national conference for women entrepreneurs. Me. The girl who once cried in her kitchen because a man told her she'd never make it alone. I stood backstage the day of the event, trying to calm my nerves. Ryan was in the front row, smiling up at me. Chloe waved from the side, mouthing, "You got this." When they called my name, I walked up to the stage, the lights blinding, the audience buzzing. And for a brief second, I thought of Jake, not out of pain, but as a point of reference. Because once upon a time, I would have shrunk from this. Now I stood tall. I started my speech with a line I'd written in my old notebook. Sometimes losing someone is the best thing that ever happens to you, because it gives you back to yourself. The room went silent. And then, one by one, heads started nodding. I told them about my journey, not as a victim, but as a survivor who rebuilt her life brick by brick. I spoke about fear, about leaving, about finding strength in the smallest decisions. And when I finished, the applause was deafening. But the best part wasn't the applause. It was the woman who came up afterward, tears in her eyes, and said, "Your story gave me the courage to leave mine." That's when I realized, closure isn't a moment. It's a ripple. Every time you share your truth, you pass the healing forward. That night, back in my hotel room, I stood by the window looking out at the city lights. My reflection stared back, older, wiser, stronger. And behind me, the soft glow of my laptop screen showed the logo for the Rebuild project. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was a promise that no one else had to rebuild alone. I picked up my notebook again, the one that had followed me through every storm, and flipped to the last page. There was only one blank line left. I thought for a moment, then wrote, "Healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering who you were before it did, and choosing her again." A few weeks later, I flew back home and found a letter in my mailbox. No name, no return address. Just one line on the envelope, from someone who finally understands. Inside was a small note. No apology, no excuses. Just 4 words. "I hope you're happy." It was from Jake. I stared at it for a long moment, not angry, not sad, just still. Then I smiled, folded it neatly, and tucked it inside the back cover of my notebook. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder that some stories don't end with revenge or apologies. They end with peace. That weekend, Ryan and I drove to the lake, our favorite quiet spot outside the city. We spread out a blanket, drank coffee from paper cups, and watched the sunset paint the sky in pinks and golds. He leaned back on his elbows and said, "You ever think about what's next?" I smiled. "All the time." He grinned. And I think next doesn't scare me anymore," I said. "Because I know I can survive the worst and still find the best waiting after it." He reached for my hand. "Then I guess you made it, huh?" I laughed softly, looking at him, then at the calm lake ahead. "Yeah," I said. "I did." It's strange, the end of a story never feels like you expect it to. It doesn't come with fireworks or music swelling in the background. It comes quietly, softly, in the middle of an ordinary day when you realize that you've stopped looking back. For me, that day came on a Sunday morning. The sunlight was pouring through the window, scattering across the floor in warm stripes. The kettle was whistling, Ryan was flipping pancakes, and the smell of coffee filled the room. It was such a simple scene, but my heart felt full in a way it hadn't in years. Because this wasn't the life Jake promised I'd never have. It was the life I built because he said I couldn't. After breakfast, I went into my little home office, the one I decorated with photos from the Rebuild project. Every picture told a story. Women smiling after signing their first lease, holding their business licenses, hugging their kids, standing taller than they'd ever thought possible. They were all different, yet every one of them shared something unspoken, that quiet look of having survived themselves. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The Rebuild project had reached a new milestone, 50,000 members. 50,000 women learning how to start again. I scrolled through their posts, One woman had left a toxic marriage. Another had gone back to college in her 40s. One had simply written, "I'm proud of myself for not crying today." That last one made me tear up. Because I remembered the version of me who used to measure strength in survival, not happiness. Later that day, I got an email from a YouTube producer who'd seen one of my conference talks online. He said, "We'd love to feature your story in a series about resilience. Would you be open to sharing it?" At first, I hesitated. I'd told my story before, on stage and workshops, but not like that. Not to an audience of millions. But then I thought about the girl sitting alone on her kitchen floor years ago, gripping a cold coffee mug while a man told her she'd never make it without him. And I realized, if that version of me could see me now, she'd want me to say yes. So I did. A month later, I found myself in a small studio, sitting under bright lights. The interviewer smiled and said, "Whenever you're ready, just start from the beginning." And I did. I talked about the fear, the control, the loneliness. I talked about the night he left and how that silence became the first step toward freedom. I talked about rebuilding, about falling apart and standing again. And somewhere in the middle of it, I noticed the cameraman had stopped adjusting lenses. He was just listening. Everyone was. When I finished, the room was quiet. The interviewer leaned forward and asked, "If you could say one thing to that man now, what would it be?" I smiled softly. "Thank you." He blinked, surprised. "Thank you." "Yes," I said. Because he broke me down so completely that I had no choice but to rebuild myself stronger. Without that, I might never have met the version of me sitting here right now. The video went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Women, men, strangers from all over the world saying the same thing. I needed this. It was overwhelming, but beautiful. And it taught me something I'll never forget. The things we think will destroy us are often the same things that shape us into who we're meant to become. That weekend, Ryan and I went hiking, something we'd started doing together on Sundays. Halfway up the trail, we stopped to rest, the wind brushing against our faces, the world stretching wide and open below us. He said, "You realize how far you've come, right?" I laughed softly. "Sometimes I forget." He smiled. "Then I'll remind you." We stood there for a long moment, just breathing, the kind of silence that feels safe, not heavy. And I thought back to every stage of my journey, the heartbreak, the confusion, the rebuilding, the quiet victories no one saw. Every version of me had fought to be here. A few weeks later, I was back in my apartment alone, working late. It was raining outside, soft, rhythmic, almost peaceful. I opened my old notebook for the last time. The one that had followed me from that tiny apartment to the life I had now. Every page was filled, goals achieved, lessons learned, pain turned into purpose. At the very bottom of the last page, beneath all the scribbles and notes, I wrote, "I didn't make it without him. I made it beyond him." I stared at those words for a while. Then I closed the notebook, not out of sadness, but completion. That chapter of my life was over. Truly, finally, peacefully over. A few months later, the Rebuild Project hosted its biggest event yet, a live conference streamed online to thousands of viewers. We called it the After. I walked out onto the stage, the spotlight warm on my face, the sound of applause rolling through the room. When the crowd settled, I said, "You can't change what happened to you, but you can decide it won't be the thing that defines you. The real power isn't in revenge, it's in rebuilding." I paused, scanning the audience. Rows of faces, hopeful, brave, shining with tears and pride. Then I said, "If you've ever been told you're not enough, if someone ever made you feel small, this is your reminder that you don't need anyone's permission to rise. You already can." The applause came again, but this time I didn't feel overwhelmed by it. I just smiled. Because I wasn't performing a story anymore. I was living it. That night, as the lights dimmed and the last guests left, I stood alone on the stage. The banners swayed slightly from the air vents, the room quiet again. And I whispered to myself, the same girl who once broke, healed, and rose again. "You did it, Sarah. You made it. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Left sooner? Fought back differently? Tell me in the comments, because someone out there might need your story too. And if you're healing from something like this, keep going. You're not broken. You're becoming. Don't forget to like, share, and follow for more real stories like this. Stories about surviving, rebuilding, and becoming everything they said you couldn't.